There is a particular kind of silence that falls over a dining room when a woman decides she has had enough. Not the silence of shock, though there is some of that. Not the silence of scandal, though that will come later, and in abundance. This silence is the kind that settles when everyone in the room realizes, at the same moment, that they have just witnessed something they will describe for the rest of their lives. You are about to witness it too. The year is 1854. The setting is a formal dining room in Grosvenor Square, London, belonging to Viscount Ashworth, a man of considerable property, considerable debts, and considerable certainty that he alone determines the fates of the women in his household. The candles are lit. The silver is polished. There are 8 people at the table, and every single one of them is about to watch Eleanor Ashworth change the course of her life, including the Duke, especially the Duke. Eleanor Ashworth has known since Tuesday that something was being planned. Her father had that particular set to his jaw, the one he gets when he has made a decision he knows will require force to implement. Her mother had been unusually quiet, which always means she knows what's coming, and has decided that looking away is the kindest thing she can offer. And Mr. Gerald Hartwell, a man Eleanor has met exactly twice, has been invited to dinner on a Friday, which is not a normal dinner night, and seated to her immediate left, which is not an accident. She has, she thinks, handled the evening reasonably well so far. She answered Mr. Hartwell's questions about her interests with composure, even when he managed to make the question, "Do you enjoy music?" sound like an assessment. She did not visibly react when he described his first wife in terms that were more inventory than eulogy. She ate her soup. She made polite conversation. She was, in every visible way, the picture of a composed young woman of good family attending a dinner. What she was not doing, and what she suspects Hartwell has noticed, was looking at him with anything approaching warmth. What she was doing, instead, was being very aware of the man seated 3 places down on the opposite side of the table. Julian Cavendish, Duke of Mercer, has been a presence in her family's social orbit for 2 years. He came in through an introduction that was always meant to end with her younger sister, Cecily, who is softer and easier and better at performing the kind of delight that men like her father find reassuring. The arrangement has never been formally announced, but everyone understands its general direction, the way you understand the direction of a river without having to see where it ends. Eleanor has spent 2 years understanding this. She has also spent 2 years noticing that the Duke, when he thinks no one is watching, is almost always looking the wrong direction. He is looking at her. She has told herself various things about this, that it is her imagination, that she is projecting, that a man in his position would not be so foolish as to develop an interest in the wrong daughter when the arrangement is already in motion. She has been quite thorough and quite sensible about it. Right now, from 3 seats away, and he is looking at Hartwell with an expression she cannot quite read. She looks back at her plate. The soup is removed. The fish course arrives. Her father clears his throat. "I have an announcement," Viscount Ashworth says, "that I believe will please everyone at this table." Eleanor sets down her fork. Not dramatically, very quietly. The way you set something down when you want your hands free. Her father outlines the arrangement with the efficiency of a man describing a property transfer, because that is, functionally, what he believes it to be. Hartwell is a man of business. The Ashworth name is an asset Hartwell would find useful. Eleanor is 24, and, her father implies, with a delicacy that is somehow worse than bluntness, not getting younger. The match has been agreed. The details can be settled next week. "I trust," her father says, with the confidence of a man who has never once had cause to distrust it, "that Eleanor will agree that this is a sensible arrangement." The table waits. Eleanor picks up her napkin. She touches the corner of her mouth. She sets the napkin down beside her plate with perfect precision. "No," she says. The word falls into the room like a stone into still water. Her father smiles the way men smile when they believe a woman is being temporarily irrational. "Eleanor." "I said no, father." The smile hardens. "This is not the venue." "You made it the venue," she says, "when you announced it at the dinner table." The room is very, very quiet. Hartwell clears his throat. Cecily looks at her hands. Lady Ashworth examines a point on the wall above the fireplace. The other guests, distant cousins, family friends, people who will dine out on this story for a decade, are collectively still. And the Duke? The Duke has not moved. He is watching Eleanor with an expression that is no longer unreadable. It is, if you know how to look, and Eleanor is very good at looking, the expression of a man confirming something he has long suspected to be true. Her father's voice drops to a register she has heard before, when he is done being civilized. "You will marry Hartwell," he says, "or you will leave this house." Eleanor folds her napkin. She places it beside her plate. She pushes back her chair. She stands. "Very well," she says, and she walks out. The door does not slam. She does not make it slam. She closes it behind her with exactly enough force to hear it catch, and then she is in the corridor. And her heart is hammering so loudly she is certain it can be heard through the walls, and she has approximately £12 in the household account she is authorized to access, and her mother's pearl ring and the clothes on her back, and that is everything she has in the world. She is halfway up the staircase to retrieve her things when she hears the dining room door open. She does not look back. She already knows. "Miss Ashworth." The Duke's voice is low, not urgent, not demanding, just present, in the way he is always present, quietly, inevitably, in the exact space where she did not expect him. She stops on the fourth step and turns to look at him. He has followed her with no apparent concern for what this looks like. He is standing at the foot of the stairs in his evening coat and his calm, and there is something in his expression that she does not know what to do with. "What are you doing?" she says. "At the moment," he says, "following you up a staircase." "You should go back." "Probably," he agrees. He does not move. "My father will be watching." "Your father is currently explaining to Mr. Hartwell why his eldest daughter is temporarily indisposed," Mercer says. "I estimate we have 4 minutes." Eleanor looks at him for a long moment. There is something rising in her chest that she refuses to identify as hope, because hope is a liability when you are standing on a staircase with £12 and nowhere to go. "Do you need somewhere to go tonight?" he says. "I need you to go back to the dining room." "That's not what I asked." She takes a breath. "Lady Voss, my godmother. She lives in Bloomsbury." He nods once. "I'll arrange a carriage." "That is—" she starts. "A carriage," he says, "is not a declaration. It is transport. You can be offended by it later when you're somewhere safe." He pauses. "Go and get whatever you need. I'll be at the side entrance in 15 minutes. She searches his face for something she can push back against. The offer is too clean, too immediate. Men do not simply arrange carriages for disgraced daughters without wanting something in return. But his expression is not that. His expression is completely steady, and it is asking nothing. 15 minutes, she says, and she turns and goes upstairs. Lady Maren Voss is 61 years old, has been widowed twice, speaks 4 languages, and has an opinion about everything. She opens the door herself. She has always refused to have the staff answer after 9 in the evening. and takes one look at Eleanor standing on her doorstep with a carpet bag and raises both eyebrows. "Well," she says, "I expected you eventually. I did not expect it to be a Friday." She steps back to let Eleanor inside, peers past her at the carriage retreating around the corner, and says, "Whose carriage is that?" "No one's," Eleanor says. Lady Voss closes the door. "No one's carriage," she repeats, in the tone of a woman who has heard every interesting thing that ever happened in London and knows exactly what "no one's" means when a young woman says it on a doorstep at 9:30. Interesting. She takes Eleanor's bag. "Come in. Tell me everything." Eleanor does. She tells it all. The dinner, Hartwell, the ultimatum, the exit. She does not mention the Duke by name when she describes the carriage, which is itself a kind of answer to a question Lady Voss has not yet asked. Lady Voss listens without interruption, which is either a sign of great respect or the strategy of someone collecting information. With Maren Voss, it is always both. When Eleanor finishes, her godmother pours 2 glasses of sherry and says, "Your father is a small man who has spent 30 years pretending to be a large one. You knew this already. What you did tonight is tell him you know it, and that is the part he will not forgive. I know. He will move against you socially within the week. I know that too." Lady Voss studies her. "You don't look frightened." "I am terrified," Eleanor says, "but I would have been terrified either way. Hartwell's house or yours. Terror is the same. At least here I chose the door myself." Lady Voss is quiet for a moment. Then she says, very simply, "Good girl." Eleanor sleeps in the small upstairs bedroom that has always smelled of lavender and old paper. She lies in the dark and listens to the unfamiliar sounds of the Bloomsbury street and takes stock. She has her mother's ring, her books, a dress for tomorrow, £17 she managed to retrieve from the household account on her way out, and the image of Julian Cavendish standing at the foot of her father's staircase, asking nothing. She does not know what to do with that last one. She puts it aside for morning and closes her eyes. He comes at 10 o'clock. Eleanor is in the parlour reading when she hears the knock. Not a servant's knock, but a very deliberate, unhurried knock. The knock of someone who has made a decision and is not second-guessing it. She already knows who it is before Lady Voss appears in the doorway with an expression of undisguised delight. "The Duke of Mercer," Lady Voss announces, as though introducing him at a ball. "He brought flowers. Tell him I'm not receiving." "I already told him you'd say that," Lady Voss says cheerfully. "He said he would wait." Eleanor puts down her book. She goes to the hallway. Mercer is standing in the entry, hat in hand, flowers in the other. Early roses, which is not the usual choice, and therefore probably a deliberate choice. And he looks exactly as he always looks, unhurried, self-contained, and in some way that she has never been able to articulate, more present than anyone else in a room. "Your Grace," she says. "Miss Ashworth. How are you?" "I am well, thank you." She pauses. "Why are you here?" "To see how you are." "You've seen. I'm well." "Good." He doesn't move. "I also came to tell you that Hartwell left the dinner early. Your father spent the remainder of the evening being very loud about temporary illness. Cecily told me to tell you, quietly, on her way out, that she hopes you slept." Something tightens in Eleanor's chest. "She said that?" "Those exact words. I thought you'd want to know." She is quiet for a moment. Then, "Thank you for the carriage last night." "It was nothing." "It wasn't nothing," she says. "It was a thing you didn't have to do, and it made a difference. You can call it nothing if it makes you more comfortable. But I know what it was." He looks at her, the way he always looks at her, like she's said something that aligns exactly with something he's been thinking. "All right," he says quietly. "You're welcome." A beat of silence. Not awkward. Something else. "You should go," Eleanor says. "If you're seen coming here, it will be noticed," he agrees. "Yes." He doesn't seem troubled by this. "I know." She searches his face. "You followed me out of that dining room." "I did." "Why?" He is quiet for a moment. Not evasive, deliberate, the way he is always deliberate, choosing his words the way a careful man chooses where to step. "Because," he says, "it was the right thing to do." It is not enough of an answer. They both know it. She lets it stand anyway, because she is not ready, this morning, with her £17 and her carpet bag, to ask the larger question. "Good morning, Your Grace," she says. "Good morning, Miss Ashworth." He puts his hat back on. He places the roses on the hall table. He does this without asking, without hesitation. And he goes. Lady Voss appears behind Eleanor the moment the door closes. "No one's carriage," she says. "Maren. Those are very fine roses." "Maren." Lady Voss picks up the roses and walks back toward the kitchen, humming to herself. Eleanor does not wait to be rescued. She has never waited to be rescued. It is arguably the quality her father found most inconvenient about her, and the quality Lady Voss finds most useful. It is Lady Voss who arranges it, through a chain of introductions so deft that Eleanor doesn't see the full shape of it until later. Lord Pemberton, a widowed Earl of 70, with a library of 4,000 books, no system of organisation, and a cataloguer who recently departed for Edinburgh, requires someone methodical, discreet, and capable of working independently for 3 months. The position does not, technically, require a reference from her family. It does require a very good knowledge of history, natural philosophy, legal texts, and the ordering systems of the Bodleian Library, all of which Eleanor happens to have read about for entertainment. She begins on a Monday. She is given a salary of 32 shillings a week, a key to the East Wing, and a note from Lord Pemberton, who she will see in total 6 times over the course of 3 months and who communicates almost entirely by written message. That says simply, "Do what you think is right. You have better judgment than Fielding, and he had the job for 12 years. She is, for the first time she can remember, useful in a way that belongs entirely to her. It is an extraordinary feeling. She is in the middle of cataloguing the 3rd shelf of the legal section. Mid-morning, pale October light through the tall windows, a cup of tea going cold beside her. When she hears footsteps on the library floor and looks up to find the Duke of Mercer standing in the doorway. He has a book in his hand. "I borrowed this from Pemberton last spring," he says. "I came to return it." Eleanor looks at him. She looks at the book. She looks back at him. "Lord Pemberton is in Bath," she says. "So he is." "You could have sent it." "I could have." She allows herself the small pleasure of watching him, just for a moment. The deliberate way he's standing, the composed expression that she has spent 2 years learning to read, and still finds she cannot entirely predict. And then she steps forward and takes the book from him. It is Blackstone's Commentaries on the Laws of England. She looks up. Something shifts in his expression. Not quite a smile, but the shape of one. "You know it," he says. "I read the whole thing," she says. "Twice." She turns to the shelf and finds its place. Pemberton has the 1809 edition. You've been reading the 1809 edition for 6 months? The property law section is interesting. The property law section is about coverture. Yes, he says. I know. She slides the book onto the shelf and turns around. He is closer than she expected. Not improperly close, but close in the way of a large room with two people in it and some gravitational law that keeps reducing the distance between them. "How is it going?" he says. "The cataloguing." Well, Lord Pemberton's previous man put the natural philosophy section next to the cookery books. I've been rectifying it for a week. He was a man of eccentric sympathies. He was a man of no sympathies, Eleanor says. He put Locke behind a plant. Mercer laughs. It is a quiet laugh, not performed, and it undoes something small in her chest. "Will you have lunch?" he says. "I have work." "You have Locke behind a plant and an entire afternoon. Have lunch with me." She should say no. She knows the arithmetic of this. A duke, a disgraced daughter, a library that is not hers. She knows what it means to be seen lunching with him, and she knows what it means to keep refusing him, and she knows, in the honest part of herself, she does not always consult, that she does not actually want to refuse. "1 hour," she says. 1 hour, he agrees. They walk to a small tea room, 2 streets from the library that Mercer knows, and Eleanor suspects he selected specifically because it is the kind of place where no one from their world is likely to be at noon on a Tuesday. They talk. This is, she will realize later, the remarkable thing about him. He talks to her the way people talk to each other when they are genuinely interested, not the way men at dinner parties talk to women they are performing interest for. He asks about the work and listens to the answers. He has opinions about Locke. He disagrees with her about one of Blackstone's arguments and defends his position rather than softening it when she pushes back, which she finds she respects more than agreement would have been. She talks more than she usually allows herself to talk. Walking back, of the October air cold and the light going gold, he says, "How much does Pemberton pay you?" "That is a quite rude question." "Probably," he agrees. "Is it enough?" "It is sufficient." "Eleanor." It is the first time he has used her name without the miss, and she does not miss it, and he knows she does not miss it. "Is it enough?" She is quiet for a moment. "For now," she says honestly. "The position ends in 3 months. I'll need to find another. I know 4 families who need cataloguers. I don't want to need you to find me work." "I know that," he says. "I'm telling you they exist. What you do with that information is your own affair." She looks at him sideways. He is looking ahead, and there is a muscle working in his jaw, and she understands, with sudden clarity, that he is being very careful. But he is being careful in the specific way of a man who has something much larger to say and is choosing not to say it because he knows the timing is wrong. She does not know whether to be grateful or impatient. She is both. "Thank you for the lunch," she says, at the library door. "Thank you for the hour," he says. He walks away without looking back. She goes inside and picks up Locke from behind the plant and stands there for a moment with the book in her hands, not thinking about anything in particular. Then she finds the right shelf and gets back to work. Cecily comes on a Thursday afternoon. She arrives at Lady Voss's house in a hired carriage, not the family carriage, Eleanor notes, which means she did this without telling their father. And she is wearing the blue coat, and she has brought Eleanor's other 2 dresses and her copy of Mansfield Park that she left behind. "You forgot it," Cecily says, holding out the book as though this explains the visit. Eleanor takes the book and looks at her sister. Cecily is 21, and not what anyone expects when they first see her. People assume from her softness a certain absence of depth. They are wrong about this. Cecily is one of the most perceptive people Eleanor knows. She has simply, unlike Eleanor, chosen to use that perception quietly. They sit in Lady Voss's parlour. Lady Voss produces tea, and then, with unusual tact, finds somewhere else to be. "How are you?" Cecily says. "I'm all right. I'm working. How are things at home?" Cecily's hands tighten around her teacup for just a moment. "Father is angry. He's been telling people you had a breakdown. Nerves." "Of course he is." "Hartwell withdrew. Not publicly, but—" Cecily pauses. "It's over. The arrangement." Eleanor exhales. She hadn't realized she'd been holding that particular piece of tension. Good. Silence settles between them. A comfortable silence, the kind that comes from knowing someone for their whole life. Then Cecily says, "Mercer has called on the house twice since you left." Eleanor is quiet. "Father thinks he's still interested in the arrangement." "In me?" Cecily sets down her cup. "He's not, Eleanor. He never was. I think I knew that within the first month, but I wanted—" She stops. "I wanted to believe it was possible. Because it would have been very convenient, and he is very kind, and I thought—" She looks up. "I thought perhaps I could be enough." Something moves through Eleanor's chest like a blade. "Cecily," she says. "No, don't." Cecily shakes her head, and there is something clear and decided in her expression. "I'm not telling you this for sympathy. I'm telling you because you need to know it, and because it's the truth. And I know, you've been telling yourself that you should keep away from him for my sake." She pauses. "You don't need to." Eleanor looks at her sister for a long moment. "He wasn't interested in you," she says. "He was perfectly polite and perfectly kind, and he looked at the door every time you walked into a room." Cecily picks up her cup. "I'm 21, Eleanor, not blind." Eleanor wants to say several things. She says none of them. What she says instead is, "Are you all right?" Cecily thinks about it. The thinking is genuine, not performative. "I will be," she says. "I am not designed for the kind of love the novels describe, I think. But I should like something real. Eventually." She looks at Eleanor. "I think you are designed for exactly that kind of love, and I think you're very busy being sensible about it." Eleanor laughs. It surprises her. It comes out before she can think about it. Cecily smiles, and it is her real smile, the one she doesn't perform. "I brought your winter shawl too," she says, "in case you forgot." They finish the tea. Cecily stays for 2 hours. When she leaves, she hugs Eleanor in the doorway and says, very quietly, "Don't be sensible about everything." Eleanor stands on the doorstep and watches the carriage until it turns the corner, and then she goes back inside and sits with Mansfield Park in her lap without opening it for a very long time. He comes 4 more times over the course of October, once to return a second book. She suspects he borrowed it specifically for the purpose, and the fact that he selected Wollstonecraft tells her something she stores away carefully. Once because he was passing and saw the light on. Once with a letter from Pemberton about a section of the legal texts, which she suspects Pemberton did not actually ask him to deliver in person. Once because, she thinks, he simply came. Each time they talk. Each time the hour stretches past the one she allows herself. Each time he leaves without pressing her, without asking for anything, without making his intentions explicit in a way that would require her to respond to them. She does not know whether she finds this more frustrating or more attractive. Possibly both. Probably both. He comes in November on a wet Thursday evening when she is alone in the library finishing the last section. And this time, when he offers supper, she says yes, without negotiating the duration. and they eat at the small table in the corner of the east wing that she has cleared of its boxes and use as a kind of makeshift office, and afterwards he helps her pack the completed catalogue, and the lamplight is low and warm, and London is dark and quiet outside, and she is aware, very aware, that this is the kind of moment that means something. "The work is done," she says. "3 more days, and I'll be finished. And then, I've had an inquiry from a solicitor's office in Holborn. They need a research assistant. It doesn't pay as well, but it's—" "Eleanor." She stops. He is looking at her in the lamplight with an expression she has not seen from him before, not unreadable. The opposite, entirely legible. "I have been patient," he says, "because patience seemed right. Because you walked out of that house with nothing, and you needed to know, and I needed you to know, that everything I have said and done since then was never about taking advantage of that. I didn't want you looking at me and seeing someone who caught you at your most vulnerable." "I know that," she says quietly. "But I have something to say," he continues, "and I have been not saying it for 2 months, and I would like, if you'll allow it, to say it now." She puts down the book she's been holding. "I have been watching you," he says, "for 2 years. Not because you were available, not because you were convenient, not because the arrangement pointed me in your direction. It didn't. You know it didn't. I have been watching you because you are the most interesting person in every room you enter, and because you argue about atlases with footmen and read Blackstone for entertainment, and because when your father made that ultimatum, you folded your napkin and stood up with the composure of someone who had already decided what she was worth, and no one was going to tell her otherwise." He pauses. "I am in love with you. I have been in love with you for a very long time, and I am not telling you this to offer you rescue, because you have made it entirely clear, and I find I am glad of it, that you rescue yourself. I am telling you because I want to be in your life. Not as a patron, not as a charity, as yours, if you'll have me." The room is very quiet. Eleanor looks at him. She looks at the composed face and the careful words, and 2 years of watching her from the wrong side of a table, and 4 visits in October, and Wollstonecraft, and the carriage on a Friday night when everything fell apart. "I have been," she says carefully, "telling myself extremely sensible things about you for 2 months. I know. None of them have worked." Something in his expression, finally, breaks open. "No?" he says. "No." She takes a breath. "I have also been in love with you for a very long time." He is out of his chair, and he is across the small distance between them in a way that has nothing unhurried about it. His hands are on her face, and he is looking at her with an expression she has waited 2 years to see, and she rises to meet him. And when he kisses her, it is not tentative. It is the kiss of a man who has been certain for a very long time and has finally been given permission. She kisses him back in exactly the same way. Viscount Ashworth is not, as it turns out, content to let it go. Eleanor should have known. She did know. Lady Voss told her on the very first night that her father would move against her socially. What she underestimated was the timing. She expected him to wait until the immediate scandal faded and then work through the slow channels. A word here, an implication there. The steady withdrawal of invitation that passes for respectable management of a problematic daughter. What she did not expect was that he would move so quickly, or that he would find so direct a weapon. The weapon is debt, not hers. She has none. His. And the particular legal mechanism of a father's authority over an unmarried daughter, which in 1854 still allows, under certain readings of certain obscure statutes, For a daughter who has not yet reached full independence to be compelled to return to her family's residence under threat of, Lady Voss's solicitor explains it with visible distaste, a writ of interference in a ward's affairs. He doesn't want me back, Eleanor says, when the solicitor has finished. He wants to control the narrative. If I'm brought back for my own protection, the breakdown story holds. That is my reading also, the solicitor says. Can he do it? He can try, the solicitor says, with the careful precision of a man who has seen worse. Whether he succeeds depends on how quickly we respond. Eleanor goes home to Lady Voss's house. She sits in the kitchen, which is where she goes when she needs to think clearly. And she thinks. She does not send for Mercer. She wants to. The impulse is there. He has resources and connections, and she knows he would respond within the hour. But she also knows what it means to let someone fight your battles before you've tried to fight them yourself, and she is not ready to be that yet. She writes 3 letters, one to the solicitor, instructing him to file a counter-response, and one to a journalist she has been introduced to through Lady Voss's network, who writes under a pen name about women's legal rights and has been looking, he has mentioned, for a case study. One to Cecily, carefully worded. Father has lawyers. I have 3 days. Please don't let him think you know anything. She sends all 3. Then she sits and reads her way through the relevant statutes. Her godmother has a surprisingly complete legal library and looks for the exact weakness in her father's position. She finds it at 2 in the morning. The statute requires proof of financial dependence. She has been paid 32 shillings a week for 8 weeks and is currently under letter of engagement with the Holborn Solicitor's Office. She is not, by any reasonable reading, financially dependent on her father. She has not been since approximately week 3. She writes a 4th letter to her own solicitor, sets it on the hall table for morning post, and goes to bed. She sleeps better than she has in weeks. Scene 10. The ball at Linfield House. The Linfield Winter Ball is the first major society event of the season. Eleanor had not planned to attend. She is not, strictly speaking, in a position to attend. But Lady Voss has been friends with Lady Linfield for 40 years, and when Lady Linfield sends a personal note saying that she finds the entire affair with Ashworth to be tiresome small-mindedness, and that Eleanor is welcome at her ball if she chooses to come, Eleanor reads the note twice and then says yes. She borrows a gown from Lady Voss's daughter, who is her height and has better dresses than opinions. She does her own hair. She puts on her mother's pearl ring. She goes. The evening begins as she expected. There are looks. There are pauses in conversation as she passes. There are 2 women who were friendly at last season's events and are now finding reasons to be elsewhere. She holds herself straight and keeps her expression neutral and talks to Lady Voss and Lady Linfield and 2 young women she likes and has nothing to apologise for. She does not look for Mercer. He finds her at 10:30 near the window at the far end of the second ballroom, where she has retreated after a conversation with a distant Ashworth cousin who made the mistake of mentioning her father's health. "You're here," he says. "So are you. How is the evening going?" "Adequately." She glances at him. "I know about my father's legal move. I'm handling it." "I know. Oh, your solicitor wrote to mine." A pause. "You didn't call for me. It wasn't your fight." He is quiet for a moment. When he speaks, his voice is very measured. "Eleanor, when someone tries to drag you back into a house by legal force, it becomes I want it to be He stops. "I want to be the person you call." "I know you do," she says. "But I needed to find the weakness in it myself first. Do you understand?" He looks at her. Something shifts in his expression. Not resignation, but understanding. A real, genuine understanding of who she is and what she needs. Yes, he says, I understand. Good. Walk with me. They move through the room together. This is not unnoticed. Nothing about the two of them in the same space, on the same side of a room, within 6 inches of each other, is unnoticed. She can feel it. The recalibration happening in real time. The way the room is adjusting its understanding of her, of the situation, of what disgraced daughter means when the Duke of Mercer is walking beside her like a man who is exactly where he intends to be. And then she sees her father. He is standing near the entrance with Hartwell, which is either coincidence or a message. And he has seen her. His expression, when it lands on Mercer beside her, goes through several stages: surprise, calculation, fury, and then the smooth reset to public composure that she has watched him perform since childhood. He begins to move toward them. Mercer, without looking at her, says very quietly, "How would you like to handle this?" Eleanor thinks for exactly 3 seconds. "Stay beside me," she says. She's scene 11, the floor of the ballroom. Viscount Ashworth is a skilled man in a ballroom. He has been performing civility over fury for 30 years. He approaches with a smile that reaches all the surfaces of his face without penetrating any of them. "Eleanor," he says, as though this is a pleasant surprise, as though she has not left his house with £12 and been served with legal paperwork. "I didn't know you'd be here tonight." "Lady Linfield was kind enough to invite me," Eleanor says. Her father's eyes move to Mercer and back. "Mercer, a pleasure." "Ashworth." The Duke's voice is perfectly even, not cold, controlled. "I wonder, Eleanor," her father says, "if I might have a word." "I don't think so." Her voice is quiet and entirely clear. "Not tonight." The smile tightens. "Eleanor, there are matters to discuss. Your situation?" "My solicitor will write to yours. He already has." She meets her father's eyes. "I found the weakness in the statute, Father. Section 4 of the 1831 Act. Financial independence supersedes parental authority in cases of non-marital adult daughters in active employment. I've been employed for 9 weeks." She pauses. "Your case won't hold." Something moves through her father's expression. It is not quite shock. He knew she was intelligent. But it is the look of a man who made a move he believed was invisible and has found it already countered. "This is not the—" he begins. "You've made it the venue twice," Mercer says. It is the first thing he's said. It is, Eleanor thinks, quite perfect. Her own words from the staircase, reflected back through a very different register. Her father looks at Mercer with an expression that is calculating despite itself. The arrangement. Cecily. The possibility that there is still something to be salvaged here. "Mercer," he says, with the particular tone of a man making an appeal to shared masculine pragmatism. "You understand that this situation, my daughter's choices, reflect on all of us. I'm sure we can come to some sensible resolution." "I intend to marry Eleanor," Mercer says. The ballroom does not go quiet, but the immediate vicinity does. The 12 people within earshot, who have all been maintaining the polished fiction of not listening, are collectively and suddenly very still. He says it plainly. He doesn't raise his voice. He doesn't perform it. He is simply telling a fact. "If she'll have me," he adds. And here he turns to look at her, and his expression is every conversation in the library, and the lamplight in November, and Wollstonecraft, and the early roses on the hall table. "Eleanor, will you have me?" The question, asked here, in this room, with this audience, is the most complete protection he could offer her. A yes, publicly stated, removes every weapon her father has. It makes the legal case irrelevant. It makes the social narrative irrelevant. It takes everything her father tried to use against her and renders it nothing. And he asked her. He asked her, here, in public, the way you ask someone when you already know the answer but want to give them the moment of saying it themselves. Eleanor looks at him. She thinks of the staircase on a Friday night, the carriage, the library, the lamplight, the word patience and everything it contained. She thinks of Cecily. Don't be sensible about everything. Yes, she says, I will. The aftermath is not instantaneous. These things never are. There are, in the days that follow, the usual tides of opinion. Those who approve, those who do not, those who find the whole affair terribly romantic, and those who find it terribly improper, and those who will always find a way to be both at once. Her father withdraws the legal action and pretends he never intended to file it. Hartwell is never mentioned again. Lady Voss declares the entire episode the most entertaining winter she has had in a decade. Cecily comes to tea the following week with a new hat and the particular expression of someone who has decided to be satisfied, which is different from resigned, and Eleanor is beginning to understand the distinction. They do not speak about Mercer for most of the tea. At the end, Cecily says, "He's very steady. I always thought he was steady." And Eleanor says, "Yes." And Cecily says, "Good." And that is enough. Eleanor finishes the Holborn position. She begins another, this one at a legal reform society that publishes pamphlets and needs someone to research case histories. She tells Mercer she intends to keep working after the wedding. He says that he assumed she would. She says she wanted to be clear. He says, "Eleanor, I have read every book Blackstone ever wrote specifically to have something to talk to you about. I know who you are." She laughs, and then she looks at him, and then she says, "You read Blackstone for me?" "I read Blackstone for me," he says carefully. "You were an ancillary motivation." "How ancillary?" "Moderately. Perhaps significantly moderately." She kisses him, which is still, 2 months in, a thing that surprises her every time she does it. Not the act, but the ease of it, the way it feels like something she has always been permitted. Scene 13. The wedding. They are married in February. Small, by the standards of a duke. Enormous by the standards of a woman who walked out of her father's house with £12. The church is in Bloomsbury, Lady Voss's suggestion, which no one argues with. And the light is the pale, cool light of a winter morning that makes everything look like a painting of itself. Cecily is there. She cried, which she will later deny. Lady Voss does not cry, which is entirely consistent with who she is, but she does take Eleanor's hand very tightly before the ceremony and say, "Your mother would have been furious at your father and delighted at this," in that order, almost simultaneously. Eleanor thinks of her mother's ring on her finger. She wore it these 3 months, and will wear it still, as something separate from everything else, as the small inheritance that was entirely hers. And she thinks, yes, almost simultaneously. Julian, she calls him Julian now, which took longer to feel natural than anything else, stands at the front of the church and watches her walk toward him. And his expression is not performed happiness. It is the expression of a man who is where he was always going to end up and has the particular peace of finally knowing it. She reaches him. He takes her hand. "Hello," he says quietly, which is not the done thing, and which she finds she loves about him. "Hello," she says. And they are married. A year later, Eleanor Ashworth, Eleanor Cavendish, Duchess of Mercer, though she will take some time to answer to this without visible surprise, publishes her first legal pamphlet. It is about the statute she found at 2 in the morning in her godmother's kitchen. The specific mechanism by which a father can attempt to compel a financially independent adult daughter's return under the pretense of protection. It is 11 pages. It is methodical and precise and very dry, which is its own kind of devastating. Julian reads it twice and tells her it is the most useful 11 pages he has read in years. She tells him he is biased. He says, significantly moderately biased. Yes. The pamphlet is reproduced in 3 legal reform publications. It is cited in a parliamentary debate the following year. Viscount Ashworth does not read it. Or, if he does, he says nothing. Cecily reads it and sends a note. Very good. Come to dinner Thursday. I have someone I want you to meet. Eleanor goes to dinner on Thursday. The someone is a physician who has opinions about infectious disease and is not at all the usual type, and she watches her sister talk to him and thinks, there it is. There is the real smile. Walking home, it is spring, the evenings finally long and warm. Julian says, well? She likes him, Eleanor says. I know. He's a good man. You know him? He is quiet for a long moment. I may have been somewhat involved in the introduction, he says. She stops walking. She turns to look at him, and he looks back with the expression of a man who knows perfectly well what he has done and is prepared to be accountable for it. You interfered, she says. I made an introduction between 2 people I thought might suit. Whether they suit is entirely their own affair. She looks at him for a very long moment. Then she says, don't tell Cecily. Already agreed. And don't do it again without asking me first. Fair, he says. She takes his arm and they walk on. London is lit up for evening, and the street smells of spring mud and coal smoke, and the faint possibility of something green. And Eleanor Cavendish, Duchess of Mercer, walks through it with the gait of a woman who knows exactly where she is going, which is exactly where she chose to go, and finds it is, after everything, after the £12 and the carpet bag and the dining room door closing behind her on a Friday night in September, more than she imagined. Not because he gave it to her, because she walked into it herself. And he followed. And that is the story of Eleanor Ashworth. The daughter nobody planned for, the woman nobody could manage, and the love that was never an accident, even when it looked like one. If this story made something stir in you, if you found yourself holding your breath at the staircase, if you knew, the moment he followed her out of that dining room, exactly what that meant, then you know what kind of stories we tell here. If you want more, and we hope you do, subscribe and come back. There's always another door closing somewhere, another woman folding her napkin and deciding she is done, another man out of his chair before he knows what he's doing, and we are always here to tell you what happens next.